Make Ireland Great Again is one of the world's largest political movements, is what you believe if you were looking in from the outside, but what if I told you it's all a facade? The protests, the beliefs, the presidential campaign are all fake with a greater power pulling the strings. However, this movement isn't just isolated to Ireland, and may very well already be in your own country, and the reason why might just change politics forever.
The eyes of the world are on Ireland now at the minute.
Make Ireland Great Again is one of the biggest and largest political movements at the moment in time. It's a phrase that sounds familiar, but out of place. It's a phrase that, until honestly as of late, was known as a joke/gag. I mean, for example, I bought this very hat off of a site called joke.ie. That's how much of a joke this is. In recent years though, it's become a movement that has been a rallying cry for nostalgia, frustration and nationalism. The Make Ireland Great Again movement has promised to bring back sovereignty, tradition, pride. No, not the gays, very much against the gays. And deporting every foreigner that has ever come onto this island. And, you know, as well, supposedly returning to this golden era that used to be Ireland. Is this supposed golden era in the room with us right now? I'd like to ask it a few questions. But the TLDR is it's MAGA, but with some green paint put on top of it. But what if I told you that this movement isn't even real? This entire movement has been orchestrated and built from the ground up by people who aren't even Irish. And more so, not even in the goddamn country. See, this movement to Make Ireland Great Again has gotten press from the United States itself, Conor Mcgregor, and various other international platforms such as GB News. Yeah. For a movement with this much credibility, I guess you could say, I don't think you'd believe if I told you that I'm just as popular as this movement. I'll explain how in a second, but let's return to my journey to Rosslare to ask the locals if even they know about this movement more than those from the outside, and this is Rosslare, the place where these protests happened. So why am I bothering getting a train all the way down to County Wexford, Rosslare, just for this video? See, a protest has happened here, and it was on behalf of Make Ireland Great Again. But why in Rosslare? See, Rosslare is the home of one of Ireland's biggest Euroports, which means, you know, a lot of cargo, a lot of stuff, and a lot of immigrants come through this very poor part, which is why this place is targeted for these protests, because the people who are doing these protests aren't even locals to this place, which makes it seem very, very fake. And the people who are covering this on the news and whatnot aren't even from Rosslare, aren't even from Wexford, they're not even from Ireland, they're from England and Canada, which is where they're based. They're not an Irish company at all, which is very, very fishy in my opinion. So, to try to emphasize how this doesn't have local support, how it seems very fabricated, I asked the locals of Rosslare myself if they even know that this protest happened.
Now, I didn't film or record anyone who was participating in the survey because, you know, it's a rural town in Ireland. You know those videos where you see people looking at a camera for the first time? They would have been like, daft, I brought one to Rosslare. So the results are, I asked around 15 people this question, and, you know, their various ages and gender and whatnot, and around 11 people had not heard of this protest. 2 had heard of it, and 3 were kind of aware of the cause and whatnot, but they weren't aware of the actual protest that happened right there.
Skibidi Toilet Unboxing, made live in Rosslare. Let's see who we got. We got TV Head Plunger Man. Wow. €6 for this. Anyway, back to the regularly scheduled content. Stop recording now. So the first person to subscribe and comment, I love Limo B and Skibidi Toilet with this very figurine. Yeah. So how come if locals don't even know about this movement, how does the United States government? I mean, for God's sake, this party got the same amount of votes as I have subscribers in the 2024 general election. See, I believe this entire movement has been orchestrated and developed overseas and not in Ireland, and I have a few pointers of evidence for who it may just be. This all started when America was giving Ireland the best gift they could ask for St. Patrick's Day. They invited Conor McGregor to speak in the White House on behalf of all Irish people. Now, contrary to popular belief, Conor is actually despised in Ireland by the majority of the population here. He plays in the big classic bold Irish stereotype, and oh yeah, he's been convicted of allegedly rape and assault. So yeah, he's generally not raid over here, and he beats up old people. Now I'll go and explain who Conor McGregor is. You more than likely know who he is. You know, the UFC fighter, the big Irish lad who does the walk. Conor McGregor spoke in front of the White House about some political affairs which, you know, can easily be debunked, but also he announced that he's running for presidency in Ireland to fix Ireland. This is immediately where the cracks are showing in this movement's reality and its whole foundation.
Good job.
See, the problem here is that Conor McGregor can't even be elected for president, and it's not that simple as the United States have it. See, to be nominated for president, to even be put forward to be nominated, you have to have 20 election votes from members of the current government. But this is where the issue comes in for Conor McGregor. You know why no one likes him over here? Well, a survey went around and asked every single one of the 180 or so members of the Dáil in Irish government, asking would they put forward Conor McGregor. And every single member of government has said no. Not even one or two said, everyone said no. Nobody likes this guy. But this stunt of trying to get Conor McGregor elected, even though it's physically impossible for him to be elected, is the start of this sowing of the seeds of what will become the Make Ireland Great Again movement, and it will be following a playbook similar to MAGA. So Make Ireland Great Again has been trying to use the playbook of MAGA to try and gain support in Ireland, you know, the same way that MAGA has blown up and been totally taken over the United States. If it works in America, surely it work here, right? So firstly, let's talk once again about Conor McGregor running for president. It is the most obvious attention-grabbing move ever done by this movement. First of all, even considering the fact that he can't really even get elected, the president of Ireland holds genuinely zero power. I mean, for God's sake, we've had a literal leprechaun as president for like the last 8 or 10 years, just because he looks like a leprechaun and he's really nice. Because all he does is go and shake hands with people. That's all you do as the president of Ireland. You have actually no power. You can't pass any laws. So if Conor McGregor becomes president of Ireland, I hope he's like doing some handshake and practicing, because that's all he's going to be doing to other leaders of the world. He does niche. Now, one of the most obvious things is that this all feels like a very orchestrated and a brute force attack on Ireland politics, is that all of a sudden, just like that, ever since McGregor was, you know, put on the pedestal by the United States, all of a sudden, just like that, all of McGregor's tweets have changed all of a sudden to be talking about Irish politics. You know, and they've gone to complete, you know, traditionalist and, you know, immigration topics and all that type of thing, and the old Irish constitution, which, you know, no one really references over here, and it's kind of taken out of the MAGA playbook because that's all they reference over there. However, one of the topics that they've ripped straight from the MAGA playbook and how to gain support over here in Ireland that has completely backfired is religion. Would you believe Conor is a devout Christian? This guy who goes around beating old men up? Maybe. Well, if you looked at his tweets, he's now constantly praising God and wanting to bring back religion into the state, which is just the worst idea I think I've ever heard. Let me just give you a quick little brief history of the church in Ireland. Religion has brought nothing but suffering to this island, and people are absolutely becoming fed up of hearing about religion in Ireland. Whether it be the Troubles, you know, a war between literal Catholic and Protestants in Northern Ireland that caused so many needless deaths to happen, that was all striked by religion. Well, use at least as religion as a, you know, a term to why they fought each other. But in more recent times, there's also been the complete surfacing of so many alleged cases of the Catholic Church in Ireland, all across the country, abusing and taking advantage of minors all across the country, which, you know, has turned people completely against the Catholic Church and made people lose complete faith in it in terms of being a governmental power. And, you know, we haven't lost religion, you know, because of this, the church has lost nearly completely all of its power in Ireland, because, you know, it's not seen in a good light at all by general people. Now, are people still religious and Catholic? Yes, religion hasn't died, but the thought of putting religion back into politics and making this God's country again is something that I'm not even sure St. Patrick would be approving of. Now, there's also lots of other things that they've just, you know, straight up like yoinked out of the MAGA playbook here. You know, they're trying to reference the old Constitution of Ireland, like I said, playing into this idea that Ireland is dying, and even leaning into some of the Andrew Tate's Matrix idea about slaving away and there being a bigger system and whatnot, which, Conor McGregor, you're not that guy. But is there really any evidence that the people engaging in this movement aren't even Irish? Well, I found some evidence under Conor McGregor's own tweets. See, Conor McGregor tweeted that he'll investigate TUSLA, which, you know, is the Irish Agency of Child Protection in Ireland. But the comments underneath his post suggested that he has no right to investigate Tesla. And then the comments began defending Tesla and how he shouldn't be investigating them. A child protection service and a car company. If you're in Ireland, you know what TUSLA is, but these guys are obviously not Irish whatsoever, so they obviously have to come in and defend Elon, of course, because it's X, it's Twitter, they have to. However, now in Conor McGregor's case, there's a problem. All of a sudden, his reputation is tanked even more, and he hasn't even made a single dime from this whole campaign. So I just want to put a pause here really quickly because there's been a new development. Conor McGregor recently has gone on to do a podcast/show with the very popular right-wing influencer Tucker Carlson. And you likely know him. There's the whole live Tucker reaction meme that has happened. You bloody know who he is. But basically, he did this 50-minute interview talking about Ireland's politics and his own agenda and whatnot, which, I'm not here to talk about his politics more side. I'm more here to talk about how this is influence from America and how it might be targeting other countries as well. But it's been very evident from this show. Tucker Carlson flew from America for this podcast, and as soon as this, episode went live, all of a sudden, a lot more right-wing content producers are starting to push this and talk about this agenda. But once again, the problem is, none of these guys are actually Irish. No one from Ireland is talking about this, whilst, there was covered in the newspapers and whatnot. No influencers, no people, no really standout figures are talking about this. It's all coming from outside sources, which kind of amplifies the fact that I feel like there's some outside influence going on here to try and control Ireland. But we still haven't gone to why that is and how it's even more amplified. I have an even bigger case study coming up later. But first, let's get back to how Conor McGregor needs to make money from all of this. So now in recent times, Conor McGregor is kind of ditching this whole Make Ireland Great Again campaign because the whole title and whatnot has not caught on at all here. Once again, it's a joke. And now they've dropped Make Ireland Great Again and they're going for Make Ireland Real Again. Whatever the hell that means. I mean, am I fake? Is none of this real? Is my house in Ireland just not real all of a sudden? But this is because he's followed the classic alt-right pipeline and he's now released his own crypto coin, which is called Real. Come on, I beg one alt-right community speaker just to not make a crypto coin.
So I want to add in a quick side note for this, by the way. The Real token completely flopped and didn't get even taken off because it only had 668 people invest in it, which was nowhere near for it to get listed, which just shows the real support that this Real token has, which is not much.
Now, what if I told you, though, that the Make Ireland Great Again slogan began all the way back in 2017. Following Brexit's exit of EU, Irexit began, which, was Ireland leaving the EU as well. Now, obviously, this never took off. We never left the EU. We're happily still in it. But things have come full circle now, as Conor McGregor is now pushing for Ireland to leave the EU too, because that would mean we'd pay less tariffs to the United States, because the United Kingdom only pay 10%. So, yeah, let's leave the EU so we can pay less tariffs. Come on, man, can you bend the knee and suck off this little orange man's Cheeto any more than you currently already are? To leave the EU just for 10% less tariffs to the United States? And if this hasn't spelled already out for you already, I believe this is America meddling in Irish political affairs, and they've been orchestrating behind this the whole time. But there's also one last piece of this playbook that spells it out broad as daylight, that all of this is just American propaganda because they went for an angle that just doesn't even exist in Ireland, which I couldn't even believe when I was reading it.
Now, it won't be a Lean Will Be video if I didn't switch positions and not elaborate why and why I'm in a different position and why I have a haircut. But anyway, so a Redditor, I know, go and dislike bomb this video and call me a slur or something in the comments, but we're referencing Reddit today, okay? So in the Irish subreddit, someone had made a post that they received some junk mail in the post. But this was no ordinary junk mail. It was advertising one of a new website called onlinenews.ie. Now, if you go and put two and two together, hints in the name, this is a site for online news, and the .ie is the Irish part of the site. Now, this is a very right-leaning website, and it talks about all political and similar issues and rhetoric that McGregor has talked about, but there's one particular issue with this website that I have. So, as an Irish person, that was something that immediately stood out to me that might stand out to maybe, let's say, in America and other parts of the world, was that there's a whole DEI section on the website. Now, this to a regular viewer might seem like whatever, but I cannot stress enough that DEI is not a topic of conversation here in Ireland, and it's while things about DEI are mentioned somewhat, the term DEI does not exist. So it's really weird now place to see it for an Irish website. During the US elections, I had to Google what DEI meant because I had never heard of it before. So this is the very first red flag I noticed on this website, which was then followed up subsequently by a second red flag, and that is that they did not speak in Irish English or British English, they spoke in American English. Which was a weird thing to do, as we're never taught to speak that way here in Ireland. Putting Zs where there should be S's and stuff. And they also reference USD as the currency on the site. There was a fundraiser going on, they reference it in USD and not euros, which is what Ireland uses. So straight away, this doesn't really scream out that this is a very local and, locally made website and ran by local people, and it looks to be very much an American-owned website. Now, so when the site first launched, it looked very clean. It actually launched on the same day day as Conor McGregor's speech in the White House, which I'm sure is not a coincidence and not planned at all. At the time, this site was attributed to like a generic Irish name. You would Google this name, nothing would come up, nothing about it. But then all of a sudden, that just changed. And all of a sudden there's this random L fart attached to this website, and the website is all of a sudden deteriorating in quality and looks like it was ran by an L fart who doesn't know how to use the internet. If I had to hazard a guess, this site was probably made by someone on the American side and then was later handed off to this Irish guy once they realized how hard they were failing at localizing the website. And I want to point out something funny, by the way. He preaches about free speech and all that, but when you look on his YouTube, you can't even comment on his own video. So much for free speech, thank you. So quite clearly, this seems to be a propaganda website set up to have its junk mail set all over Ireland to try and organically grow its website, because it wouldn't organically grow here because it's not actually Irish. So they have to try and prop it up by just brute forcing its way into the market. But what does this mean for the bigger picture? Now with this website, and you know lots of tweets coming in from Conor McGregor as well, of course, they're starting to promote distrusting mainstream media outlets, which is something that MAGA has done into oblivion. And I wish I could play Oblivion Remastered right now, but here I am recording this video for you guys, look at you guys, But they're peddling the same rhetoric that refugees are earning more than Irish citizens and earning €500 per week. When if you do one Google search, you can find out that in reality, it's about €38 a week, which is pennies. You got fake news, distrusting mainstream media, Christianity, and what I'm going to call Conor McGregor now is Andrew Tato, and numerous other pointers that point towards this just trying to be MAGA, but in Ireland. I mean, we even have bumper stickers of people like going around with Trump on the back of their car nowadays. It's become clear that MAGA has duplicated itself in Ireland. So how is this actually played out? Once we know this party doesn't have actually any support, has it actually really made a difference for Ireland and maybe the wider European picture? The Irish voter is one of the most stubborn voters in existence. I mean, we're currently protesting the release of bloody John Pork. We're about a year late to this party, but we're protesting, guys. But seriously, Ireland has voted for the same two parties for like the last 100 years. Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, they're the two parties that ruled over Ireland for 100 years. The hold that these guys have on power in Ireland cannot be understated, and there's no way that the Make Ireland Great Again movement can clearly get in, as it's clearly failed in localization of its movement and not caught on with people enough to sway them transition from voting for the same party that they voted for their entire life. And the MAGAs that are trying to implement Make Ireland Great Again here, you know, haven't really taken into account that Ireland is just fundamentally different than the United States. From calling McGregor to win the president election, which is clearly just, you know, a show because it'll do nothing for him at all. You know, they've also been pushing agendas of pro-Russian or like pro-Israel views here in Ireland, which have completely flopped. Ireland is a smaller nation who has fought off bigger powers to win independence before in the past. Ireland's forever on the underdog side in conflicts of these natures, as it's in our own very nature. And this is all well and good, you know, the party hasn't taken off, it doesn't seem to have made an impact, doesn't seem to have caught on yet. But that doesn't mean it isn't making an impact on the current government in power. Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael are two parties that have always had power in Ireland. They're considered centre of right, but some would argue they're a bit more further right. But one of the reasons why they've stayed in power is because they leave pots of gold at the end of rainbows. Do you guys even find leprechaun jokes funny? I didn't even find that one funny. I don't know why I said it. That's not. One of the reasons that they have always stayed in power, though, is because of pandering. Whenever public opinions on matters begin to sway in certain directions, they tend to lean more into that direction to pander to these votees and to keep them happy. But it's very sad because this coalition is actually starting to feed into this right-leaning movement and sentiment that's growing in the country at the moment. And I'll explain to you how. They're the ones that have been responsible for not dealing with the housing crisis in Ireland, which is the main reason why I believe so many people have become anti-immigration and people are starting to say Ireland is full. Ireland most certainly is not full, but Ireland has not kept up with the demand that Ireland has. Now I want to put another pin on this housing crisis issue. I want to go a little bit further. So a lot of people do point the finger at immigrants for why they can't afford houses. You know, it is true, some immigrants are taking up some of the housing capacity that Ireland has. Ireland, however, though, is nowhere near full as they claim. See, vulture funds and investment firms have been invited to just penetrate us anally and just take all of the houses buying up streets at a time. Vulture funds were responsible for 20% or €4.2 billion worth of purchases of housing last year. And you know what this means? You know what these do with these houses? Well, what they do is nothing.
They do absolutely nothing. They sit there derelict and unoccupied while they can then just leave the supply low on houses while the demand keeps soaring, which is why we're left today where an average house in Dublin costs €350,000, which is completely unaffordable. So it makes sense why some of these people might, blame immigrants for taking up the houses, because it seems like very little is left. But there are so many derelict houses left in Ireland that are just left unoccupied. But in reality, some of these people are pointing the finger at immigrants are just racist, but I feel like a lot of them led them the wrong path, and I think it's very clear to see. And it's like, you can understand why people are frustrated about not being able to live in their own country. I mean, for God's sake, even I'm living in my own parents' house, and I'm working a job and making money from this, and I still can't afford to live on my own.
No, what they're doing is they're making it an us, which is, the Irish people, and then having it versus them, the immigrants coming in and blaming the finger at them for why the housing crisis and why people can't afford to live in Ireland anymore. And instead, we're pointing the finger at them instead of the government, which is the real perpetrator of causing all of this to happen. I mean, we're starting to see anti-immigration protests start trying to spell this out and show people that this is the reality of the situation. But one question I've wondered the entire time is why? Why would America be bothered dealing with such a little country of 5 million to switch their political allegiances? Surely there's bigger fish to fry. Ireland is home to some of the US's biggest companies. I mean, we got Google, Metal, Intel, and many, many more. You think of a big company of America, it's in Ireland. And they're here because Ireland offers a very low corporate tax rate, we have access to the EU market, and we have a highly skilled and educated workforce. Get myself a bit of a pat in the back with that one. Won't lie, this part of the video, I have the tinfoil hat on. It's borderline conspiracy theory, but this is what my best guess is for it. If you remember earlier, I mentioned that McGregor brought up Ireland leaving the EU. This is an idea that has been further propelled by the movement to control our borders, blah, blah, blah. Brexit. It's basically Brexit, okay? They're wanting us to leave the EU. Same rhetoric that they had. Which would be the opposite of what they advocate for, because they want only high-skilled workers, but leaving the EU would just stop high-skilled workers from the EU joining us, so I don't get the logic there. Anyway, pushing an agenda of Ireland leaving the EU, America can try and attract its companies back to America. These companies would all of a sudden lose access to the EU market from Ireland, which is one of the main reasons why they're here, which would make Ireland a significantly less and worse proposition to stay in and would most likely leave. And this is a big part of Trump's goal with these tariffs and whatnot, and it's something he's openly stated and targeted, is that he wants to bring companies that are American, located in Ireland, back to the United States, which is something that he's gone on record and said. But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory. If you guys enjoyed this video, you'll more than likely love my video about the subscriptions and how they're evolving to become even more dystopian than they currently are. Let me know what you guys think of this. I'm back into politics, and next video won't be politics. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.